All right, class. First off, as always, good day. I'm glad you're here. So today we are going to be talking about the how a king basically becomes king, what do they rule, and then we're going to be talking about the Inquisition later on. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. First, we're going to look at the objectives today. How the importance of the Magna Carta basically affected the world. It's also known as a Great Charter. Okay, excuse me about that. We're going to examine the level of engineering skills it took to basically build a city on the lake. We're going to be talking about that. And then we're going to create an argument on which Central slash Southern American empire was more impressive. Okay, so, oops, sorry about that. So here's your warm-up picture. Um, Basically, the first question asks you, what do you see? Okay, I believe it says like list, create a list, or at least three things. One of those two, I can't remember as of right now. Um, but go ahead, pick out your three things or create your list. Three things you see, and what do you think is happening in this picture? Okay, so be sure to press pause on this video so you can answer that question because we're moving on in three, two, one. All right, so here's the thing. Back in the day, um, the kings were seen as like God picked them. All right, either God picked them or they were related to the king. This is known as the um, divine theory. Okay, um, basically, again, like I said, people thought that God picked their king and therefore they can't do any wrong, right? Because God doesn't make any mistakes. And like I said, remember, people back then, the poor people, all they really had was their mind and their souls. And they really didn't go to school, so their mind didn't really learn much, but their souls is something they could take care of. So that's why they went to church. And here they are basically being told that God picked your king, so you can't get mad at your king because God picked him. You get mad at him, you're basically getting mad at God, which is not a fair argument whatsoever. Okay, as you guys may or may not know, power was passed down usually to the son, the next born son, things like that. Now, the thing is, at this time, there was a lot of different little kingdoms here and there, and what would happen is these kings and guys would be like, okay, how are we going to make our empire bigger? One of them was through war. Another one was through marriages. They would have one would have a son or a daughter, basically have them get married. Their kid would then rule that land, whatever it may have been. Okay, um, and it just went on like that for years to come. Now, the lineage, because of this, sometimes it got a little complicated, as you can see in this picture on the bottom. Who's going to be next in line? Who's the next king if something happens to this one king? Is it going to be the cousin over here? Is it still going to be this person who's related to them? You know, and it kind of got difficult and got kind of complicated at times. Okay, especially if the king, didn't have a son or a daughter or anything. Then it would be like, well, who's next? Well, let's look at the chart, and sometimes it got complicated. Now, not all kings were great, not all kings were bad. I'm going to give you a couple examples of good and bad kings, quote unquote. Okay, good and bad. So Charlemagne was considered a good king. Richard the Lionheart was considered a good king. If you've ever seen the Robin Hood, the little cartoon from Disney with the fox as the Robin Hood and things like that, um, that was a time of Richard the Lionheart and his brother King John. Now, King John, gets that reputation of being a good king, and he really wasn't, to be honest. Now, if any of you guys have ever seen the movie Braveheart, that was King Edward the First. His nickname was Longshanks. This guy was really a bad king. He was not that he like just did nothing. He actually did the opposite. He was actually hands on with things. He was ruthless. Really was a ruthless king. Um, And the thing is, he had a son, which was Edward II. Now, Edward II was opposite of his dad. His dad was let's do this, let's attack, and his son was more of a, oh, I'm king, I really don't have to do any of this stuff, I don't want to do that. Yeah, no, just go fight, I don't care. Why are you bothering me with this stuff? God. He was one of those type of people where the dad was ruthless and just charged and just did things. Um, his son was totally 180 and just like, yeah, type of person. So, what did the king actually rule? Well, obviously land, a lot of land. He controlled the army. He got to tell them where to go, when to attack, things like that. Now, the thing is, he told them where to go, but he didn't really own them. That was the nobles. The nobles are the ones who had the soldiers, had the knights, and things like that. And they would serve the king, but mainly because of the nobles. Okay, now the king did rule over the nobles, but the nobles could easily, because of their power, because of their wealth, they could easily go against the king. Okay, and obviously the serfs and the peasants, they were ruled by the king. Now, like I said, the nobles had some umph against the king, and that's exactly what happened to King John. He thought he was Chingon, he thought he was a top dog, he thought he was, oh, I'm the king, well, nobody can step over me, nobody can do anything to me. And the nobles basically shut him down. Okay. And on June 15th, 2015, 1215, sorry about that, they made him sign this thing called the Magna Carta, and that's the document on top you see there. Um, this is the first document to limit the power of the king. All right. Before this time, the king could basically do what he wanted, and it was up to the nobles if they really allowed it. But this document is like their final, like, that's it, enough of you. They're going to limit your power. We're going to limit your power. So there were 63 clauses on there, and in a nutshell, basically says that no one is above the law. Not the king, not the nobles, not the peasants or the serfs. Nobody is above the law. Also on there, it went over some rights that people had. Now, originally, the rights were just for the nobles, but as time went on, the wording, didn't say just the nobles. It said the people. The people have this right. So as time went on, people kind of forgot that it was just meant for the nobles, and they started taking it as this is the right of all the people, all the citizens of this area. You have individual rights. You have rights when it comes to justice. You get to hear if you're being accused of a crime. Before, they could just arrest you and say, "Oh, yeah, we arrest him. We think he's, part of something, but we can't. We're not gonna tell you." You have right in trial. For one, you got a public trial. Trials had to be done in public where people could see, people could hear that you were actually being charged or accused of something. Um, Whereas before, they just could arrest somebody and then say, "Oh yeah, we had a trial for them. We tried to find you, but we couldn't find you, so we just went on without you. So sorry, your uncle or dad or whoever, you know, but their trial already went through. It probably didn't." Now here's the thing. The church kind of went against some Christian kings. Because the thing is, some of these kings were like, I'm above, you know, everything. But the church was like, no, no, no. We are the representation of God's word on earth. We are above because no one could be above God. And the kings are like, no, no, no. See, here's the thing. We're kings. You guys are men. You guys interpret the law. You're not God yourself. So I'm above you. And it just kept going back and forth, specifically between Pope Gregory the Seventh and King Henry the Fourth. They kept going back and forth at each other, like who has more power, who has more authority. Okay. Now the Spanish had this thing called the Inquisition. Basically, they took Jewish people, Muslim people, and even other Christians and Catholics whom they felt were not living the good life, the good Christian Catholic life. But the Jewish and Muslim people, they try to convert them. They saw it as we're saving their souls. We're trying to save their souls because, You have to accept, Jesus as your savior and things like that. If you don't, your soul's going to go to hell. So we got to help these people. And they won't listen to us. So we got to convert them. How are you going to convert them? Well, we're going to torture them. What? All right. And that's what they did. They tortured them to convert them. This bottom picture right here, you see some people being crucified. And there's, um, some examples right there. Um, and some looks like a person being burned at the stake in the back. Yeah, yeah, that's some things they did. Now, the thing is, let's say you confessed. You said, yes, I am not going to be a Jewish person anymore. What they usually do is they have you publicly acknowledge it, and then they would brand you. And if you don't know what branding is, basically they would get like a hot piece of metal, you know, put in the fire, and then press onto your chest. Sometimes they put it right over the heart, and it would be a cross. And if you can imagine skin being pressed against with hot metal and being taken away, because remember the skin would then be boiling and this and that, and they'd take it off and it rip and things like that. So it was very torturous. Um, and if that happened, someone did that, and they still went back to being a Jewish, going back to Jewish churches, the synagogues and some of that, then they would either be tortured again or they'd be crucified as making penance to God for going back against your word, type of thing. Yeah. So my question to you is this: which one of these six do you think is the most torturous and painful? So let me go through it really quick. Number one, it's this pulley thing. They would basically tie you up to the ends and turn it, turn it, turn it, so it got tighter and tighter, so your arms are being and legs are being stretched. Okay. Sometimes they used horses. One horse on one end, one horse on the other. And if you've ever ridden a horse, you know those are very powerful animals. And them barely walking, if you try to pull it back, man, those things are going to take you. Okay, because they are strong animals. The second one is basically what they did was they tied your arms and ankles together, and then they would hoist you up like 40 some feet in the air, maybe 50 feet in the air, and just let you hang there in public. And sometimes your arms and legs might come out of their socket, and you just hang there. The next one, number three, is basically waterboarding. They put you in a position where water and constantly pour water down you, and you couldn't breathe. You can, you even try to, even then when you blow out, you're still taking in air, but it's constant water being forced on you. So it's like you're drowning, but you're not really in water. Okay. Number four, it's this. They tie you to this wheel, and they would have fire underneath, and they crank you, and you would get burned, face, chest, legs, all that stuff. And then when they brought you back to the top, all right, do you confess? Do you want to change your evil ways? No. Okay, let's do it again. Let's go slower this time. So that was bad. Number five is this chamber where they had spikes all over, so you really couldn't move, and you had to stand up, and they would keep you there for, geez, sometimes days on end, and you couldn't sit down because then you get stabbed. You moved a little to the side, you get stabbed. A little bit to the other side, you get stabbed. And imagine if you've ever been poked with something, your natural reaction is to move away from it. So imagine being poked and trying to move, and and you're constantly being stabbed, poked in the head, shoulders, legs, everywhere. Very torturous. Number six, you may not be able to see it with the camera right there, but let me move that here. Basically, they tied you to the slab, right? Your feet, legs were held down. They held you back sometimes in the arms, the chest, and they would basically burn your feet until you confessed or until you quit, things like that. So there's the six. Of those six, which one is the most torturous or most painful to you? Which one do you think would be like, oh, I could not do that. That's the worst one for me. Which one and why? Okay, so go ahead and answer that question. All right, so then we come to this next question. What are your thoughts about the Inquisition? Do you think that it was okay for the church to do what they did? Do you think it's okay for them to torture people? But remember, to them, they think they're doing the good thing by trying to save their souls. Because according to the Christian Catholic religion, you have to accept Jesus as your savior in order to go to heaven. Okay, and these guys, the Jewish people do not see him as the Messiah. The Muslim people see Jesus. They acknowledge Jesus. They acknowledge that God talked to him, but they don't think that he was the savior. They don't think he was the Messiah. That he was God's chosen one. Okay, they think that was Muhammad. Okay, so again, they acknowledge that God did talk to him. He was a prophet, but he wasn't the savior that these Christians and Catholics say he was. Okay, so that's why they did it. They're thinking they're doing good to those people's souls, trying to save them. Do you think it's okay? Why or why not? Okay, so pause the video if you're still writing, but we're moving on in 3, 2, 1. So we went going from Europe and Spain to the Americas because we're going to be talking about the ancient civilizations here in the Americas, which were the Olmecs, Mayans, Toltecs, Aztecs, Incas. Okay. First, we're going to start with the Olmecs. The Olmecs are the oldest group to ever have like an empire here on this side of the world. Okay. They were around from 1200 BC to 400 BC. So their reign was about 800 years, right? They're the first group to actually unite, conquer, and build an empire. Okay? Now, the Mayans came in around 300 to 900 AD. Okay? They built some amazing temples. Now, here's the thing I'm going to say this again because I've heard it so many times from people because they watch TV and they think it's true. They watch the internet and YouTube and they're like, oh my God, these guys are right. Aliens helped these people build the pyramids. How can pyramids all of a sudden show up in America, in Egypt, in China, if these guys have never talked to each other? It's easy. It's easy to explain that. One, triangle is a basic shape. All right, you have several basic shapes. Cylinder, circle, and triangle. Okay? Cylinder, if something's strong enough to like shake the earth or strong enough winds, it's gonna topple over. I would drop it, but I have something in there. I have a drink in there, so I'm not gonna topple it over. Circle, if wind comes or the earth shakes, it's going to roll away. Triangle, if the earth shakes or strong winds come, it's going to move, but that's it. Triangle is the most sturdiest of the basic shapes. So again, these older empires and civilization people, yeah, they were not smart like us with technology and things like that, but they were still smart people. And they realized, triangle, very sturdy shape. Okay? So don't believe those people you see on the YouTube or on, the different channels are like, it's aliens, man. It's like, how can you explain it? It's easy. I just did it right there. Okay? It just takes some thinking. Don't be accepting what those type of people talk about and all that kind of stuff. Okay? So, like I was saying, the Mayans were very smart, specifically in math and astronomy. Okay? Their astronomy was so amazing, so precise. That's where they built their calendar. Right? Now, a lot of people were like, oh my God, if you remember back in 2012, oh my God, the world's going to end. The Mayans predicted the end of the world. No, basically, what all they predicted was that the planets were going to align. That's it. Okay? Nothing almighty and this and that. No. That's just people, again, that mandala effect. People thought, oh, we know it ends. And what happens at the end? Oh, I heard the world ends. Oh my God. Yeah, it probably is. And people believed it. Okay. Now, mathematicians, yes, they were amazing. They're the first civilization to think of zero. Every single civilization up to this point was always like starting off with a one, two, three, things like that. The Mayans were the first to realize, you know what? There's zero. Right here in my hands, there's nothing. That's something that there's nothing there. Okay. Could you add something? Sure. But there's nothing there. That means there is something. Okay. So the absolute value of zero, that's still something. These guys realize that. And they're supposed to be dumb, old civilizations. But yet they thought of something nobody in the other side of the world thought of for years. Yes, Mayans had slaves. They would capture the noble people, and basically what they did was the people who led war against them, they would take those leaders and basically sacrifice them as a way to show, hey, this is what happens when you go against us. We kill your main guys. They did have little city states, very sophisticated civilization, but the thing is, somewhere around 800, 900 AD, they started to really decline, and then it just went away. Eventually, the jungle reclaimed the land. The vines and trees started growing back, and they took over the temples again. It wasn't until hundreds of years later that these temples and stuff were cleared out from the jungle and things like that. Now you can look on Google and see the pictures, and you can still see jungle all around them, but they maintained the land around them, because they don't want the jungle to take over it again. Next came the Toltecs. These guys were actually conquered a lot of land, more than a lot of other people. Now the thing is, they were really prized up on gold, silver, copper, things like that. They were a warlike people. The thing is, though, they kind of stretched themselves a little too thin. They were basically fighting too many people at one time, and they made a lot of enemies, so their empire kind of went down and declined. All right, next comes the Aztecs. A lot of you guys may have heard that term before. The Aztecs were a large group, right? They were a migrating group. They moved from place to place because supposedly there was an image that one of the elder people had, that from the gods said that they should settle on a land where there's a eagle eating a snake on top of a cactus. So they're searching, they're going through, wandering around, going with the food, and then they finally see it. They see the eagle, which is a symbol of Mexico now. The eagle with the snake in the mouth on top of a cactus. Here's the thing, though. What they saw, it was on a little island in the middle of a lake. Yeah. So it's like, that's where a city's supposed to be? Yep. Let's build. And so they did. And they basically built a city on top of a lake. Yes, you heard me right. This picture is very accurate. They built a city on top of a lake. Now, Venice, Italy is a city on top of a lake. Okay? And the guy Hernan Cortez, the one who came and conquered the Aztecs, when he saw this image, he basically was like, oh, that's impressive. Wow. He thought, these guys are like natives, they don't know about God, they must be savages, they must be dumb. And he comes and sees this, he's like, oh, wow, that's pretty cool. Dang it. All right. The name of their town, their city, their headquarters was called Tenochtitlan. All right, that's how it's pronounced right there. It's in the Lake Texcoco. They did have roadways, just like you see there. They had roadways and stuff like that on a lake. Okay, I can't emphasize that enough. Okay, it's very impressive. And it's still today, but we now know it as Mexico City. Okay, so what happened is, Aztecs made alliances with two bigger groups. They basically remained friends up until 1519, 2 years before their complete demise. what they would do though is the areas they conquered, the little towns and places they conquered, they would tell them, you need to give us food, tribute, something. So they would give them like jewelry, clothing, fruits, gold, silver, whatever. Okay. Now another thing is breaking the mandala thing. A lot of people thought that Aztec people were fighters, they were warriors, things like that. No, not all of them. A lot of them actually were farmers. Okay. Um, the another thing too is that the nobles were the people who went to school. They're the ones who got the military training. So they were the ones who eventually became the leaders of the military, the leaders of the government, and the priest. Okay. Now here's the thing. I've had students ask me this all the time. Is it true that they sacrifice people? Yes. Did they really cut open people's chests and take out their heart? Yes. They would even show it to the crowd sometimes. Well, actually, majority of the time, they would show it to the crowds. Um, did the Aztec people eat other people? No. No. Right? They were not cannibals. Okay? The royal family ate the hearts of the people sacrificed, but that's it. Okay? That's it. It didn't go down to the common people were, cannibals and some of that. No, that's false. Okay, but again, people hear, oh, the Aztecs they ate people. No, the royal family had the hearts of those that were sacrificed. Okay. Now the Incas, they are located in current day Chile, which is on the west side of South America. There's like a thin strip. That's where they're at. Their population was about 12 million people. Basically, the men were forced to join the armies. Um, the area, the land, was broken up in different places, and the nobles were put in charge. Okay. Now the thing is, the Incas were kind of unique because the thing is, they would say, you know what, you don't have to basically like pay tribute, things like that. You just got to be loyal to us. Okay. And one of the things of showing loyalty is working for the empire. And so what they would do is require people to work for labor forces. Okay. Building roads, things like that. So it could be something as small as, let's you guys clear out some of these trees, things like that. Some of them have been like, hey, this peak of this mountain, you guys need to break it up, chop it down, and then if that takes you 5 months, 6 months, 8 months, so be it. That's your job. Make that top part of the mountain even. Okay. Um, so it just all depends what the nobles said. Their road system was impressive because you have to remember a lot of it's mountain areas, and they would have roads going up, down, through, around the mountains. So they had about 24,000 miles of road. Okay. Another interesting thing was women could be priests in the Inca Empire. And also, they did not have a writing system, but they did have the system where it was like strings hanging down, and there would be different little knots. So it'd be like a knot, and then like maybe half an inch away, another knot, another half, another knot, and then like 3 inches, and then another knot, and then another inch, and then another knot. That would mean something to them. What does it mean exactly? We don't know because a lot of their information was destroyed. So it's hard to understand what it was. Okay. But yes, this is their, that's like a city right there on top of a mountain. So, so here's your next question. Based off your prior knowledge and what you've learned today, which Mesoamerican civilization do you feel is the most impressive? And give 2 reasons why. Was it the Olmecs, Mayans, Toltecs, Aztecs, or Incas? Okay. Now again, Olmecs are the first empire they actually conquered, they united, places. Mayans had the math, the astronomy, the temples, the Toltecs had the biggest empire of them all, uh, and they were warlike people. Aztecs, as you guys know about the city on the lake, they had the sacrificial stuff. They basically use tribute to keep their empire going. And of course, the Incas had the road system, cities on top of mountains, things like that. So, which one was most impressive to you and why? Okay. So, if you haven't finished writing, continue writing, but we're moving on in 3, 2, 1. Lastly, here is your exit ticket. Why was the Magna Carta so important? Okay, so there's one question. Second question, on a scale of 1 to 10, how impressed are you that the Aztecs built a city on a lake? 1 being like, I mean, Venice did it, so not too impressive. Or 10, like, wow, that's awesome. And explain why. Why'd you pick that number? Okay. Third one, which Central Southern American empire was the most impressive to you and why? So again, which one was impressive and explain to me thoroughly why you picked that one. Okay. So once you're finished, that's it for this lesson, you guys. Hopefully you learned something new. Hopefully you enjoyed this one. You guys take care. You be safe.